Amara, please, leave him.
Victor's intense, sure, but look at everything you have. Some women would kill for your problems.
You always find a way to smile, even on the hard days.
She always falls for the underdog.
From the outside, Amara's life looked complete. Victor wasn't just wealthy, he was a legend in this city. The businessman whose name got tables reserved without a phone call, whose face sold magazines, whose charm made rooms go quiet when he walked in. Out of every woman who wanted him, he had chosen her. He gave her everything money could buy, a penthouse where the city lit up beneath her feet every night, vacations to places she used to only see in movies. People didn't just admire Amara's life, they ached for it. But behind those curtains, Victor's love came with conditions that crept up slowly. First, it was small things, an opinion about her outfit, a comment about a friend he didn't like. Then it became bigger. What she wore, who she spoke to, where she was allowed to go. And when she questioned any of it, something in him would snap. Abusive words, then raised hands. The next morning, there were always flowers waiting, diamonds, whispered apologies that sounded almost sincere. Almost. Amara told herself what so many women in her position tell themselves, that this was simply the cost of loving a passionate man. Some quiet part of her already knew that wasn't true. She just wasn't ready to listen to it yet. Amara leaned on two women in very different ways. Ada never softened the truth. She noticed the makeup applied too carefully some mornings, the flinch at sudden movement, and she said it plainly every time, "Leave him, before there's nothing left of you to save." Then there was Sandra, the friend who never told Amara to leave, but never judged her for staying either. She poured the wine, listened without flinching, and reminded her again and again that she wasn't crazy for feeling what she felt. Victor's intense, sure, but look at everything you have. Some women would kill for your problems. Amara took it as tough love. What she didn't know was that Sandra's comfort came at a hidden cost, because somewhere in the quiet corner of Sandra's mind, watching Amara live a life dripping in luxury had planted something dark. She told herself she was just being a good friend. She was wrong, and that quiet hunger would soon reshape everyone's life around her. There was exactly one place Amara didn't have to perform, a modest laundry shop on a quiet corner run by a young man named Daniel. Daniel didn't know about the mansion or the magazine covers. He just noticed a woman carrying something heavy behind her eyes, and instead of asking questions, he simply took care of her. He stitched a torn sleeve without charging her. He remembered exactly how she liked her clothes folded. He treated her every time like she mattered. Their conversations were nothing extravagant, just simple honesty. And somewhere between the folded shirts and easy small talk, Amara found something she thought she'd lost, the ability to laugh without checking over her shoulder first. It was nothing more than friendship, genuinely, purely, nothing more. But that didn't stop Sandra from planting a different idea in Victor's head entirely. You know, Sandra told Victor one evening, voice dripping with false concern, "I saw Amara at that laundry place again. She seemed really comfortable there, almost too comfortable." She said it with a smile, like a passing observation. Victor dismissed it the first time, jealous talk maybe, or Sandra just making conversation. But Sandra didn't stop. Small comments became small questions. Anonymous messages arrived, always timed to land exactly when Amara happened to be visiting the shop. There was nothing real to find. Amara and Daniel were exactly what they appeared to be, two people who had become friends. But to a man already wired for control and jealousy, even the truth can be twisted into something unrecognizable. and Sandra made sure it was. The night of the city's biggest charity gala, Sandra suggested Amara swing by the shop first to collect a dress, a quick errand before Victor arrived to pick her up. In the same breath, in a message Amara would never see, Sandra told Victor exactly where her girlfriend would be standing. Victor arrived at the worst possible second, just as Daniel made Amara laugh over some small, silly joke. To a man already convinced there was something to find, that laugh looked like proof. He didn't ask a single question. He crossed the street in a blind fury and lunged at Daniel. Daniel didn't fight back. He raised his hands, absorbed blow after blow, trying to calm him down. But when Victor turned and shoved Amara hard to the pavement, something in Daniel finally broke, and he stepped between them, taking hit after hit just to keep Victor away from her. A crowd gathered. Someone lifted a phone. By morning, the entire city had watched their untouchable golden businessman, the man on magazine covers, violently attack a defenseless woman and an unarmed laundry worker in broad daylight. The mask Victor had worn for years was gone in an instant. But something else happened that night too, something Victor never saw coming, and something Sandra never intended to create. In the hours after the attack, Amara sat in the back of Daniel's shop with an ice pack pressed to her cheek, hands still shaking. Daniel knelt in front of her, bruised and bleeding himself, and instead of asking if she was okay, he simply held her hands still until they stopped trembling. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "You could have just let him take me and walked away." "I know," he said quietly. "I couldn't." Something about surviving violence together, about a man choosing to absorb pain rather than let her face it alone, cracked something open in both of them that had never been there before. It wasn't planned. It wasn't romantic in the way Sandra's lies had painted it. It was born entirely out of that terrifying, bloody night and the quiet realization that here was someone who would rather bleed than let her be hurt again. In the weeks that followed, what began as gratitude slowly, honestly, became something neither of them had been looking for. And this time, when Amara found herself unable to stay away from the little shop, it wasn't just friendship pulling her there. She packed a single suitcase, left the penthouse, walked away from the wealth, the parties, the lifestyle every woman in the city envied, and moved into a small apartment above the shop, where a man who had bled for her now folded her clothes like they mattered, because to him, everything about her did. If Victor's rage before the attack had been built on a lie, what came after was built on something far more dangerous: the truth. Because now there was no denying it. Amara hadn't just been too comfortable with some laundry worker. She had left him. Left the empire, the diamonds, the mansion for a man who owned nothing but a small shop and a good name. To Victor, this wasn't heartbreak, it was theft. In his mind, Daniel hadn't earned Amara's love. He had stolen it simply by refusing to run the night everything went wrong. And a man like Victor did not lose gracefully, especially not to someone he considered beneath him. Sandra watched it all unfold with quiet panic of her own. The fantasy she had been secretly nursing, Victor's attention, Victor's world, all for herself, was slipping further away with every day Amara stayed happy with someone else. So she stayed close, playing the perfect comforting friend while continuing to feed Victor's fury from the shadows, certain that a broken, humiliated Victor would eventually need someone to rebuild him. She just needed Daniel gone first. Since he could no longer control Amara directly, Victor decided to control everything around her instead. Using his money and influence, he set out to erase Daniel completely. got him fired from every supplier relationship within days, pressured landlords to reject his rental and business applications one after another, spread rumors that Daniel was a con artist who charmed wealthy women for their money. Amara watched it happen in real time. Every phone call that didn't get returned, every customer who suddenly stopped coming, every door quietly closing, and she understood with growing horror that none of it would stop as long as she stayed. Victor's pride wouldn't allow it. He needed to win publicly and completely, and the only way to end the war was to remove the reason for it. So Amara made the most heartbreaking decision of her life. She told Daniel she was going back to Victor, not because she'd stopped loving him, not because the life in the penthouse held any pull over her anymore, but because she believed, with her whole broken heart, that leaving was the only thing that could make Victor finally leave Daniel alone. Daniel didn't beg her to stay. He simply smiled through tears and said the words that would haunt her for months. "If going back means you'll stay alive, then I'll survive missing you." That single sentence shattered something in her no apology could ever repair. While the city moved on, Ada couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. Too many coincidences. Too many times Victor had shown up exactly when he shouldn't have, long before there was ever anything real between Amara and Daniel to find. Quietly, she began digging. What she found made her sick to her stomach. Months of deleted messages between Sandra and Victor, stretching back to long before the attack. Sandra feeding him Amara's location, planting suspicion where none belonged, engineering the very confrontation that started this entire chain of events. And buried deeper still, Sandra had been meeting Victor alone the whole time, quietly hoping that once Amara was finally out of the picture for good, he would turn to her instead. The friend who had held Amara's hand through the worst nights of her life had been the hand that pushed her into them in the first place. When Ada laid it all out, Amara didn't just feel betrayed. She felt like the ground had disappeared from under her entirely. Victor's reaction to the truth wasn't guilt, it was disgust. Not because Sandra had betrayed her best friend, but because he realized she had been manipulating him too the entire time for her own gain. He threw her out of his office with one final ice-cold line. "If you could betray your best friend this easily, one day you'd betray me too." In a single afternoon, Sandra lost everything she had spent years secretly chasing: her friendship, her reputation, and the fantasy life she thought was finally within reach. With the truth finally exposed, Amara understood something clearly for the first time. Her sacrifice had never actually protected Daniel. It had only protected Victor's pride. She went back to Daniel again, this time for good. Daniel had nothing left but an old delivery tricycle, a borrowed ironing table, and a handful of loyal customers who still believed in him. He'd been rebuilding from zero, one honest day at a time, never once turning bitter. Amara found her way back to him and apologized for a decision she now understood had been engineered from the start. Slowly, carefully, they began rebuilding, not just a small business, but each other, this time with nothing standing between them. Eventually, the viral video from that first violent night reached a woman named Naomi, someone who had dated Victor years before Amara ever came into the picture. She watched the footage over and over, hands trembling. The same rage, the same insults, the same pattern she had spent years quietly believing was somehow her own fault. For the first time, she understood the truth. She had never been the problem, and she wasn't the only one. Naomi came forward publicly. Then another woman, then another, each account echoing the last. Expensive gifts, careful manipulation, sudden violence, and the same practiced apologies that always followed. Victor's carefully built empire collapsed piece by piece. Business partners withdrew, sponsors vanished overnight, old cases were reopened that had quietly disappeared years earlier without explanation. The very reputation Victor had used as a weapon for so long became the thing that finally destroyed him. Meanwhile, Daniel's small laundry business kept growing, not out of pity, but because of something Victor never once understood: honest, consistent respect offered to everyone, every single time. Months later, Daniel brought Amara back to the small shop where it all began, where a single night of violence had, against every possible odd, become the birthplace of the realest love either of them had ever known. Nothing had changed. The same worn wooden counter where she'd once dropped off a torn sleeve. The same quiet corner where she'd first remembered what it felt like to laugh without fear. He knelt down. No orchestra, no flashing cameras, no luxury at all. Just two people who had bled and nearly lost everything to find their way back to each other. Tears rolling down her face, Amara looked around the tiny shop that had somehow become the most important place in her entire life, and she whispered the words this whole story had been building toward. I used to think love was about how much someone could give me. But love is someone choosing to bleed for you, and you finally being brave enough to let them. She said yes. The little laundry shop that once cleaned her clothes had ended up cleansing her life. Real love doesn't announce itself with diamonds. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in a torn sleeve, a folded shirt, a hand that won't let go even when it's bleeding. If this story moved you, hit like so more people can find it. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that walking away can be the bravest thing you ever do. And subscribe, because the next story might just save someone too.